If I were to make a list of my top qualities, foresight and an almost obsessive neatness would be at the very top. My name is Nancy Carmichael, and at 62, I've learned that life, much like a meticulously kept ledger, rewards careful planning and a clear understanding of assets. I always believed it's important to plan ahead. Many of my generation cling to paper calendars, but I embraced the digital age years ago. The crisp, large numbers on my tablet screen are far easier on my tired eyes, and the automated reminders ensure I never miss a beat. Today, like every Wednesday, my digital calendar reminded me it was time to check my investment portfolio. My apartment, nestled on the third floor of a charming but unassuming building in a quiet Chicago suburb, is modest. A cozy bedroom, a living room that blends seamlessly with a compact kitchen, and a small balcony where I cultivate a fragrant collection of basil and mint. My neighbors, mostly young families and students, would probably be astonished to discover that the seemingly quiet, retired woman living in such humble conditions commands a financial empire with 7 figures in her accounts. It wasn't that I was intentionally hiding my wealth. I simply never saw the point in flaunting it. True power, I always believed, resided in quiet strength and strategic accumulation, not flashy displays. I turned on my laptop, the soft hum a familiar comfort, and navigated to my brokerage accounts. Investments in diversified index funds showed steady, predictable growth. Nothing dramatic, no overnight windfalls, but that was precisely the kind of predictability I craved. A consistent 6% annualized return, diligently reinvested quarterly, had built up an impressive amount of capital over the decades. My late husband, Arthur, God rest his soul, often joked that I was the only forensic accountant who treated her personal finances with the same rigorous care as a complex corporate audit. Arthur. It's been 8 years since he passed, but I still find myself referring to him mentally, seeking his silent counsel. We met when I was 24 and he was 28. He was a brilliant civil engineer, designing complex bridge structures for the city, and I was just starting my career as a junior forensic accountant with a prestigious financial investigations firm downtown. Our marriage wasn't the fiery, passionate unions they romanticize in novels. Rather, it was a partnership, a meticulously crafted alliance between 2 practical, analytical minds who found in each other unwavering support and profound understanding. We both valued order, reliability, and moderation. We built our lives like we built our careers, with precision and a long-term vision. Ethan, our only son, was born when I turned 30. It was a difficult pregnancy, fraught with complications, and the doctors strongly advised against risking another. So, we limited ourselves to 1 child. Perhaps that's where our grand mistake began. He became the undisputed center of our universe. He got the best of everything, from the finest toys to the most exclusive private schools. We poured all our hopes and dreams, and a significant portion of our meticulously managed finances, into his future. I minimized my investment portfolio and opened the real estate file on my desktop. The primary asset, the one that often weighed heaviest on my mind, was a stately 2-story house in a tree-lined, increasingly affluent neighborhood on the North Shore. Arthur and I had purchased it for Ethan 20 years ago when he married Chloe, a bright, ambitious woman he'd met in business school. Technically, the deed to the house had always remained in my name. It was a strategic decision, made after consulting our tax attorney, designed to minimize future tax burdens and ensure a smooth intergenerational transfer. As I'd explained to Ethan at the time, he hadn't minded. He considered the house entirely his own, a symbol of his burgeoning success. He paid a nominal rent, a token amount, more of a symbolic tribute than an actual financial commitment. The last payment had arrived last month, 2 weeks late. I hadn't reminded him. Why create unnecessary tension? Our relationship, a delicate tapestry woven with years of my financial support, already felt strained to the breaking point. I took off my reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of my nose, the familiar ache, a dull throb behind my eyes. In recent years, I'd found myself pondering, with increasing frequency, where Arthur and I had veered off course. Our son, Ethan, now a senior marketing executive, had somehow morphed into a selfish, perpetually entitled man. He seemed to only call when he needed money, or when Chloe, his wife, needed a favor, usually involving the grandchildren. Ethan's last visit to me was 3 months ago. He'd needed a substantial sum, urgently, for what he vaguely described as critical car repairs. I had given it to him, of course. I always did. Outside my window, the early afternoon sun began to dip, casting long shadows across my balcony. Rain began to fall, small, persistent drops drumming softly on the glass, creating a surprisingly cozy background noise. I closed my laptop, the screen going black, and walked into my small, immaculate kitchen. Cooking for just myself wasn't particularly exciting, but I rigidly maintained the ritual of a full, balanced meal. Today, it was baked salmon with roasted asparagus and a crisp glass of Sauvignon Blanc. Arthur wouldn't have approved of wine in the middle of the day, but then again, Arthur wasn't here to offer his opinion, a bittersweet realization. When we first met, Arthur was an avid amateur photographer. I still possessed a thick, leather-bound album filled with black and white photos from our youth. There I was, a slim young woman with a sharp chin and an intensely attentive gaze, impeccably dressed in a severe accountant's suit. There were Arthur and I, serious, with a shared vision, meticulously planning for our future. And there was little Ethan, his cherubic face beaming, so full of innocent joy. It was astonishing and profoundly disheartening how quickly that unblemished childhood affection had curdled into the adult coldness I now faced. After lunch, I was scheduled for my weekly book club meeting. 4 women, all roughly my age, were the only regular social circle I had left. We discussed literature, shared local news, and, of course, inevitably veered into conversations about our children and grandchildren. I was usually reticent on the latter subject. What was there to say about grandchildren you saw 2 or 3 times a year? Lily, 16, with her perpetually bored expression glued to her smartphone, and Leo, 14, seemingly fused to his gaming console. They felt almost like strangers to me. I arrived home promptly at 5 p.m., the soft chime of my antique grandmother clock marking the hour. The red light on my answering machine blinked insistently, a silent harbinger of impending demands. The message from Ethan was, as usual, short and devoid of preamble. Mom, Leo needs a new computer for school. His old one is completely broken. 1200. Call me back. No. How are you? No, hope you're doing well. Just the precise amount and a curt demand to call back. I slowly took off my coat, hung it carefully in the closet, and then, with a sigh that felt too heavy for my small frame, made myself a cup of chamomile tea. Only then did I reluctantly dial my son's number. Ethan, it's Mom. You left a message about the computer. Finally, his voice snapped, edged with annoyance. I called 3 hours ago. Where were you? At a book club meeting. We were discussing The Silent Daughter, Doris Wilcox's new novel. Who? He sounded utterly impatient. It doesn't matter. Listen, Leo needs a computer right away. There's some new project at school, and his old laptop can't run the programs. $1,200 is a lot of money for a school computer. I ventured cautiously, trying to inject a note of financial prudence into his cavalier request. Mom, it's not just a school computer, he interrupted, his voice rising in irritation. It's a special laptop for graphic design. Leo's showing a real interest in creativity, and we need to support him. The we, I noted grimly, clearly referred to me, not him or Chloe. I sighed internally. Of course, I would help. I always did. But Ethan, I tried again, softer this time. Perhaps we should talk about budget and planning. These expenses seem to be escalating. Mom, please, he practically shouted, cutting me off. Don't start lecturing me about finances. We're having a hard enough time as it is. Taxes are up. Utility bills are through the roof. Chloe had to take on extra hours at the real estate office. I listened to his litany of complaints in silence, the familiar weight settling in my chest. None of them, not once, had ever bothered to consider how I managed to live on my modest civil service accountant's pension. They never wondered how I meticulously saved and invested, how I denied myself small pleasures, how I calculated every penny to secure their future, not my own. "All right, Ethan," I finally said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I'll wire the money tomorrow morning." "Good." His tone instantly shifted, becoming annoyingly friendly, as if the entire unpleasant exchange had never happened. "And by the way, we're having a family dinner on Saturday. It's no big deal, just a casual hangout. You want to come?" I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this invitation had materialized only after I agreed to yet another substantial financial contribution. Yet, I said yes anyway. A tiny, foolish part of me still clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, this time it would be different. Maybe Lily would tear herself away from her phone and actually share something about school. Maybe Leo would express genuine gratitude for the expensive new computer. Maybe Chloe wouldn't roll her eyes at every innocuous comment I made. "Of course I'll be there. What time?" 6 o'clock. "And Mom," he paused, a calculated hesitation. "Could you bring your apple pie? The kids absolutely love it." There it was. The true reason for the invitation. My apple pie. The recipe, a cherished heirloom passed down from my grandmother, was apparently the only thing my family still valued me for. It was the only thing they believed I did truly well. "Okay, I'll bake the pie," I promised, the words tasting like ash in my mouth, and then quickly said goodbye. After the conversation, I sat for a long time, the chamomile tea growing cold in its cup, the comforting silence of my apartment a stark contrast to the cacophony of my thoughts. My mind, a professional calculator, began spinning with numbers, tallying the immense sums I'd funneled into Ethan's family over the past few years. A high-end computer for Leo, an expensive summer camp for Lily, countless car repairs, lavish new living room furniture, even a significant portion of their college fees. Though Lily was still years away, they'd already tapped into my reserves for a future education fund. The list was endless, a damning indictment of my enabling generosity. The house we'd originally bought for Ethan and Chloe had cost $250,000 at the time, representing nearly all of Arthur's and my hard-earned savings. Now, its market value was exponentially higher. The neighborhood had transformed, becoming a coveted, prestigious enclave with an abundance of new infrastructure, including highly rated schools and chic boutiques. I regularly received unsolicited offers from ambitious realtors and eager developers, all keen to acquire the property. The last such letter had arrived just last week. Lakeside Developments, a well-known luxury builder, had offered a staggering $1.2 million. As usual, I'd declined the offer. This house, I had convinced myself, was for Ethan and his family, their bedrock of security and stability, a tangible manifestation of Arthur's and my endless love. The next morning, with a profound sense of resignation, I transferred the $1,200 to Ethan's account. Then, steeling myself, I went shopping for the ingredients for the pie, the very symbol of my perceived value. At the bustling local supermarket, I encountered Beatrice, my sprightly neighbor from down the hall. An energetic 73-year-old, Beatrice had recently returned, glowing, from a 2-week Mediterranean cruise. "Nancy," she chirped, waving cheerfully, her eyes twinkling behind stylish, oversized sunglasses. "How are you? Are you baking your famous pie today?" "Yes. I'm going to visit my son's family this weekend," I answered, carefully selecting a bushel of crisp Honeycrisp apples, their vibrant red skins mocking my internal turmoil. "How wonderful!" Beatrice beamed, her enthusiasm genuine. "My children are always so busy. They rarely find the time to visit me. It's good that your Ethan makes time for family get-togethers." I offered a tight, polite smile, nodding vaguely, not wanting to betray the bitter truth that I was only invited for my culinary contribution and after the promise of yet more financial aid. Beatrice, oblivious to my internal struggle, continued to regale me with tales of her cruise, the picturesque Greek islands, the new friends she'd made, her ambitious plans for a solo trip to Japan next spring. "Hey, you should come with me, Nancy," she suggested, her voice full of lighthearted encouragement. You can't sit at home all the time, waiting for the children to visit. Life is too short, dear. There's a whole world out there waiting for you. I forced another polite smile, the thought of international travel feeling utterly absurd, almost sacrilegious. Who would help Ethan and his family if I left? Who would bake the apple pie for Saturday night's dinner? That evening, as I rolled out the delicate pie dough, a wave of bittersweet nostalgia washed over me. I remembered how much Arthur had loved to watch this precise process. "You do it with such precision, Nancy," he'd say, his eyes twinkling. "It's like you're preparing a financial report." And we'd both laugh, a rare, shared moment of lightheartedness in our otherwise serious lives. Arthur had truly understood me, cherished my practicality. I wondered what he would say about our son now. Would he approve of my seemingly endless financial support? Or would he, with his keen sense of logic and self-reliance, advise me to finally teach Ethan to stand on his own 2 feet? The house we'd bought for our son had once been our collective pride. 4 spacious bedrooms, a gleaming gourmet kitchen, a sprawling backyard with a custom-built barbecue pit. Everything Arthur and I could have only dreamed of at Ethan's age. We had wanted Ethan to have what we hadn't: an unburdened start, a foundation of comfort and security. Perhaps that, in hindsight, had been our most profound mistake. I finished crimping the edges of the pie, the intricate lattice work a testament to my unwavering attention to detail, and carefully slid it into the preheated oven. Tomorrow, I told myself, I would go to my son's house, smile, listen to their self-absorbed conversations in which there was clearly no room for me, and hope that, for once, one of them would be genuinely happy to see me there, not just my pie and my money. Saturday arrived with an unsettling swiftness. I chose my best suit, a deep navy blue ensemble perfectly complemented by a delicate pearl brooch, a cherished gift from Arthur for our 30th wedding anniversary. The apple pie emerged from the oven precisely as the grandchildren preferred it, with a perfectly crisp golden crust and a juicy, fragrant filling of caramelized apples and warm cinnamon. After carefully packing it into a special insulated container, I called an Uber to Ethan's house. The neighborhood where my son lived had transformed almost beyond recognition in recent years. When Arthur and I had first purchased the house, it was a quiet, modest suburb with charming, if unremarkable, real estate. Now, modern, sprawling cottages rose majestically from every corner. Manicured lawns, worthy of a glossy magazine spread, competed with immaculate landscaping, and rows of obscenely expensive cars gleamed in the driveways. Ethan's house, a stately 2-story with a pristine white facade and a dark, imposing roof, looked solid and respectable, but certainly not flashy, a stark contrast to the new money architectural statements surrounding it. The Uber stopped smoothly at the wrought iron gate. After paying the driver, I walked slowly down the winding stone path. Chloe, with her penchant for expensive trends, had insisted on replacing the original, charming brick walkway 2 years ago. The old one, she'd declared with a dismissive wave of her perfectly manicured hand, seemed outdated and provincial. I, of course, had paid half the cost of the extensive work. Lily, my oldest granddaughter, opened the door, her face a mask of teenage ennui. Tall, with straight dark hair that mirrored her mother's, and a perpetually disgruntled expression, she looked more like Chloe than Ethan. "Hello, Grandma," she mumbled, her eyes never lifting from the glowing screen of her latest model smartphone, her voice utterly devoid of enthusiasm. "Hello, dear, how's school going?" I asked, attempting to inject a note of warmth into the chilly reception. "Fine," Lily shrugged, a gesture so dismissive it was almost offensive. She stepped aside, barely, allowing me to enter the house. The spacious hallway, usually a bastion of artificial perfection, smelled vaguely of fresh-baked goods and something vaguely exotic and spicy. Apparently, Chloe was experimenting with Asian cuisine, a new phase in her obsession with competitive cooking shows and meticulously curated social media posts. "Mommy's here!" Lily yelled toward the kitchen, her voice flat, and then immediately disappeared upstairs, leaving me standing alone in the cavernous hallway, my pie container clutched awkwardly in my hands. I carefully placed the precious pie container on the ornate console by the entrance and began to take off my coat. No one, of course, rushed forward to offer assistance. As I hung it on the polished brass hook, I caught my reflection in the antique mirror, noticing the new, deeper network of wrinkles fanning out from the corners of my eyes. Time, I thought grimly, truly was merciless. In the kitchen, Chloe bustled around the gleaming stainless steel stove, her movements brisk and agitated. She was 20 years Ethan's junior, a bright blonde with sharp, angular features and a voice that, even when lowered, carried with piercing clarity. When she caught sight of me, she merely offered a curt nod, never once interrupting the phone conversation clamped between her ear and shoulder. And I told her it was totally unacceptable. Can you even imagine that in the 21st century? Chloe paused dramatically to stir something simmering in a skillet, her perfect brows furrowed in feigned indignation. "I'll call you later, Courtney. The mother-in-law is here." She uttered the word mother-in-law with a faint, unmistakable note of irritation, as if it were an unpleasant chore rather than a familial connection. "Hello, Chloe," I said, trying to be helpful, my voice a soft counterpoint to her aggressive pronouncements. "What can I do for you?" "Nothing, thanks," she replied, turning her back to the stove, a clear dismissal. "Ethan's in the garage, tinkering with the new grill. Leo's in his room playing. Dinner will be ready in half an hour." The hint was unmistakable. I was not expected, nor desired, in her immaculate kitchen. I retrieved my pie, its warmth a small comfort, and made my way into the living room. Everything here, too, had been transformed since my last visit. A sprawling sectional sofa in a trendy charcoal gray dominated the room, complemented by a minimalist glass and chrome coffee table. An enormous abstract painting, all harsh lines and jarring colors, screamed expensive from its place on the wall. Not a single piece of furniture Arthur and I had helped them pick out, not a single echo of our shared past, remained. I settled into a solitary armchair by the window, the late afternoon light fading, and gazed out at the sprawling backyard. There was Ethan, wrestling with a colossal new grill, clearly the latest, most extravagant model. A professional chef's dream. A sharp pang of curiosity, quickly followed by a familiar sting of resentment, shot through me. How much had that monstrosity cost? And why, I wondered, had I not received a call asking me to contribute to this particular purchase? After a few minutes, Ethan finally spotted me through the window and offered a weak, distracted wave. I managed a polite smile and waved back. He looked tired, I noticed. Deep circles shadowed his eyes. New wrinkles creased his forehead, and a faint dusting of gray now streaked his temples. My boy, my once vibrant, endlessly cheerful boy, was growing old. He used to have such an infectious laugh, an endless stream of curious questions. Where had all that gone? Ethan came into the house through the back door, wiping his grease-stained hands with a pristine white towel. "Hi, Mom," he said, leaning over to offer a perfunctory kiss on my cheek. He smelled of an expensive cologne, overlaid with the faint, unsettling scent of car oil and something vaguely metallic. "How was your trip?" he asked, already turning towards the kitchen. "Fine, thank you. I took an Uber." "You could have called, and I would have picked you up," he offered, his tone flat, devoid of genuine concern. We both knew it was merely a polite formality. A hollow gesture. The last time I'd asked him for a ride, he'd canceled at the last minute, citing an urgent work meeting. "Didn't mean to interrupt your grilling," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. "I see you have a new one. It looks impressive." "Yes, it's a beast of a grill," Ethan said, his face finally brightening, a flash of genuine enthusiasm replacing the strained tension. "Infrared burners, adjustable temperature, even Wi-Fi. You can control it from your smartphone." "Must be expensive, huh?" I asked, pushing gently, cautiously. His face changed immediately, the enthusiasm draining, replaced by a familiar defensiveness. "Mom, you know we're in a difficult financial situation," he began, launching into his well-rehearsed lament. "But sometimes you have to invest in the quality of your life. Not everything is measured in money." The phrase uttered by him sounded particularly ironic, considering how often he came to me, his personal ATM, for financial assistance. But I bit back my retort. Why spoil a rare, albeit strained, family reunion? Of course, darling. I was just asking. He nodded, clearly eager to end the conversation before I could press further. I'm going to go change for dinner. Has Leo seen his new computer yet? Yes. It was delivered yesterday. He loves it, I replied, a small, genuine smile touching my lips. Thank you. We couldn't afford it right now. Always happy to help, I said sincerely. Despite all the difficulties that plagued our relationship, I did love my son. And deep down, I still yearned for his family to be genuinely happy, even if it came at my expense. Ethan disappeared upstairs, and I was left alone in the vast, silent living room. After a while, I heard the heavy thud of footsteps descending the stairs. It was Leo, my grandson, his gaze firmly fixed on the tablet clutched in his hands, completely oblivious to his surroundings. Hi, Grandma, he mumbled, without even a cursory glance in my direction. Hello, Leo. How do you like the new computer? It's fine, he shrugged, just like Lily had done an hour earlier, his tone as indifferent as hers. Thanks. Why don't you tell me what kind of projects you're using it for? I tried desperately to spark a conversation. Leo finally raised his eyes from the screen, meeting my gaze with mild irritation, as if I had interrupted something profoundly important. Grandma, it's hard to explain. You wouldn't understand, he said, his voice flat, devoid of anger, merely stating what he perceived as an undeniable fact. But it was no less hurtful. I could try, I insisted, a flicker of my old professional pride rising. After all, I used to work with complex computer systems at the IRS. He snorted, a derisive, dismissive sound. That was 100 years ago. Technology has changed. Before I could even formulate a retort, Chloe's shrill voice echoed from the kitchen. Dinner's ready! Everyone to the table! Leo disappeared instantly, vanishing like a wisp of smoke, and I slowly, stiffly rose from the armchair. The dinner was a blur of polite fictions and thinly veiled resentments. Chloe's Asian fusion dishes were surprisingly palatable, but the conversation was, as always, insipid, circling around their new acquisitions, their social climbing, and their financial woes, which of course always seemed to require my intervention. Lily was still engrossed in her phone, occasionally offering monosyllabic answers when directly addressed. Leo devoured his food with the focused intensity of a ravenous wolf, barely looking up. Ethan, tired and stressed, seemed perpetually on the verge of snapping, occasionally chastising the children for their lack of engagement, only to be met with eye rolls and sighs. I offered small, benign comments, mostly ignored. My apple pie was devoured, of course, with exclamations of delight from everyone. It was the only genuine appreciation I received. As the evening wore on, the alcohol flowed more freely, loosening Ethan's already precarious self-control. After dessert, as Chloe cleared the table with ostentatious sighs about her busy day, Ethan cornered me in the living room. Mom, he began, his voice slurring slightly. We need to talk about the house. My stomach tightened. This was it. What about it, darling? I asked, my voice betraying none of the apprehension I felt. Well, you know how expensive everything is getting, he slurred, waving his hand vaguely. And this neighborhood. The property taxes are insane. We're really struggling to keep up with the costs. I waited, my gaze steady. So, he continued, taking a deep breath, Chloe and I were talking, and we think it's time we formalized the rent. We need you to start paying a fair market rate. Say, $5,000 a month. Or, frankly, Mom, you need to consider other living arrangements. We can't keep subsidizing your attachment to a property that's truly ours. It's either pay your rent or get out. The words hung in the air, cold and stark, like a death knell for all my hopes. Pay your rent or get out. After all these years, all my sacrifices, all my quiet support, this was my reward. This was the true measure of their gratitude. A chilling calm settled over me. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a profound, liberating clarity. The scales had finally fallen from my eyes. I looked at my son, his face flushed with alcohol and entitlement, and saw a stranger. "I see," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but firm, steady. Chloe, attracted by the rising tension, entered the living room, a sardonic smirk playing on her lips. "It's simply practical, Nancy. We're in a different stage of life. We can't be burdened by sentimentality. You have your pension, your quaint apartment. It's time you became truly independent." Lily, drawn by the drama, peered down from the top of the stairs, her phone still clutched in her hand. A flicker of something, perhaps confusion, in her usually blank eyes. Leo remained oblivious, lost in his virtual world. "You're right, Chloe," I said, looking directly at her, then back at Ethan, my gaze unwavering. "You're absolutely right." I stood up, smoothing the fabric of my suit, my movements deliberate. "I will make other arrangements." Ethan looked surprised. Then a flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Good. We just needed you to understand the reality of things, Mom. It's for everyone's good." "Indeed," I replied, my voice still quiet. I walked to the console by the door, retrieved my empty pie container, and calmly put on my coat. "Good night, Ethan." "Chloe." I didn't even glance upstairs at the children. Ethan, seemingly mollified by my apparent compliance, offered a dismissive wave. "Drive safe, Mom." I stepped out into the cool night air, the heavy scent of their new grill lingering. I didn't call an Uber. I simply walked. Each step I took, away from that house, away from their demands, away from the suffocating illusion of family, felt lighter than the last. I walked until my legs ached, the cool air clearing my mind, solidifying a resolve I hadn't known I possessed. When I finally reached my apartment, the clock read past midnight. I didn't turn on any lights. I simply sat by my balcony window, watching the city lights twinkle, and for the first time in years, I felt a surge of unadulterated freedom. The offers from developers, the ones I had so dutifully declined, now seemed like shining beacons of opportunity. I had a clear path, meticulously charted. The next morning, Sunday, I didn't bother with my usual routine. I bypassed the news and my quiet breakfast. Instead, I retrieved the letter from Lakeside Developments. Their offer of $1.2 million, once an abstract possibility, was now a tangible solution. As a forensic accountant, I knew the real estate market, I knew contracts, and I knew how to move quickly and discreetly. I called their primary contact number, leaving a concise, professional message indicating my immediate interest in their offer. Then, I drafted a carefully worded email to Ethan and Chloe. It stated, simply, that due to their concerns about property expenses and their desire for me to be truly independent, I was formally ending our existing arrangement for the house. I wished them well in finding new accommodations that better suited their financial and familial needs. There was no emotion, no accusation, just cold, hard fact. I sent it, and then I blocked their numbers. Every single one. The ensuing week was a whirlwind of activity. Lakeside Developments, eager to close the deal, moved with impressive speed. My years in financial investigations had honed my ability to navigate complex paperwork, to spot a fraudulent clause a mile away, and to ensure every detail was precisely in order. I hired a sharp real estate attorney, a former colleague from my firm, who understood discretion and efficiency. We worked tirelessly, poring over documents, coordinating inspections, and finalizing the terms. Meanwhile, Ethan and Chloe's calls began to flood my old landline, which I rarely used and had muted. Then came the frantic voicemails, a crescendo of confusion, then anger, then outright threats. "Mom, what do you mean you're ending the arrangement? This is our house. You can't just... What are you doing? Call us back immediately. Nancy, this is Hope. You can't be serious. Where are we supposed to go? You're ruining everything." I listened to them, impassively, the words echoing hollowly in my small apartment. Their panic, I realized, was not for me, but for the loss of their comfortable, subsidized life. I felt nothing. No guilt, no sorrow. Only a quiet, resolute satisfaction. Just 5 days after that fateful dinner, I signed the final documents at the attorney's office. The transfer was complete. The house, once a symbol of my unending generosity, was now officially sold. The proceeds, minus the necessary fees and taxes, were wired directly into my offshore investment accounts, adding another significant zero to my already impressive net worth. I sent a final, anonymous, certified letter to Ethan and Chloe, simply informing them that the property at their address had been sold, and they had exactly 30 days to vacate. There was no explanation, no sentiment, just the brutal truth. The calls intensified, reaching a fever pitch. Ethan, then Chloe, then even Lily, tearful and bewildered, pleading for explanations. I remained silent. I had given them years of explanations, years of financial aid, years of my life. Now, it was time for me to live. The following week, Beatrice knocked on my door, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and admiration. "Nancy, have you seen the news? Your son's house. It's been sold. There are movers there right now." I smiled. "Yes, Beatrice, it has. I decided it was time for a change." Her jaw dropped. You? You sold it? The house you bought for them?" "Indeed," I confirmed, a sense of lightness filling me. "It was a sound financial decision, and a necessary personal one." Beatrice looked at me, a new respect dawning in her eyes. "Well, I never. You sly fox. So, about that trip to Japan?" My life, once defined by quiet sacrifice and the relentless demands of others, suddenly stretched before me, vast and exhilarating. I immediately booked a luxurious, extended cruise, starting with the Mediterranean, just like Beatrice's, and then connecting to a grand tour of Asia, culminating in Japan. I hired a personal assistant to manage my affairs while I was away and began to truly live for the first time. On board the ship, I met Roland, a charming, witty, retired history professor from Boston, with a twinkle in his eye and an insatiable curiosity about the world. We bonded over early morning walks on the deck, shared meals, and long, meandering conversations about everything from ancient civilizations to modern art. He had a passion for photography, just like Arthur. But unlike Arthur, he encouraged me to be in front of the lens, to capture my own joy. "You have a remarkable story in your eyes, Nancy," he'd say, his camera clicking softly. Meanwhile, word trickled back through mutual acquaintances. Ethan and Chloe had been forced to sell off many of their expensive possessions to cover the cost of a smaller, far less prestigious rental in a less desirable neighborhood. Ethan's career took a hit, too, as his increasingly erratic behavior affected his professional relationships. Chloe's social media presence dwindled, her carefully curated image of effortless luxury crumbling under the weight of their new reality. Lily had to switch to a public high school, and Leo, stripped of his high-end gaming setup, was forced to confront a world beyond his virtual reality. The self-inflicted struggles they now faced, I knew, were a direct consequence of their entitlement and their cruel dismissal of my worth. Months passed, filled with stunning landscapes, vibrant cultures, and the genuine camaraderie of new friends. I learned to scuba dive in the Red Sea, took cooking classes in Thailand, and hiked through ancient temples in Cambodia. I wasn't just existing, I was thriving. One evening, while enjoying a spectacular sunset over the Japanese coastline with Roland by my side, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Lily. I hadn't changed my email address, only my phone number. I hesitated, then opened it. The subject line read, "Grandma." The message was short, surprisingly mature. "Grandma, I know you won't read this or reply, but I just wanted to say, I get it now. Life's different. Harder. But I'm learning to play the cello at my new school, and it's actually good. I miss you. And your pie. I hope you're okay, Lily." A warmth, a soft, unfamiliar ache spread through my chest. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was a glimmer, a tiny seed of hope. Perhaps, from the ashes of their entitled lives, something genuine could finally grow. I looked at Roland, his eyes mirroring the fiery hues of the setting sun. "Ready for another adventure?" I asked, a playful challenge in my voice. He grinned, reaching for my hand. "Always, Nancy. Always." My son yelled, "Pay your rent or get out!" and I left. But a week later, I sold the house, not out of revenge, but out of a profound act of self-preservation. I destroyed the illusion they had built on my generosity, not to punish them, but to free myself. And in doing so, I didn't just reclaim my wealth, I reclaimed my life. I finally understood that true love isn't about endless sacrifice, and true family isn't measured in financial contributions or forced proximity. It's about respect, genuine connection, and the unwavering courage to define your own worth, even if it means leaving behind those who refuse to see it. My legacy wasn't the money I left, but the freedom I found, a freedom I chose, fiercely and unapologetically for myself. And that, I realized, was the greatest inheritance of all.